Oh, I see it. Yeah.
Hey, welcome everyone to the Notary Public Day Extravaganza. I am really excited. I've been excited every single session, but this person needs no introduction. I know that you all know Mr. Daniel Lewis. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. Certainly appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much. I'm going to be covering today, if I can get oh, there it
We're going to
is.
give him a minute, but I do want to shout out. There's so many credentials that I could give for Daniel that it'll take us all day. But he has a podcast, the Notary Podcast. And if you have not heard this, then I want you to go to YouTube and subscribe because he does some amazing interviews on there and you don't want to miss it. Having said that, that was my shameless plug for Daniel's
Oh,
YouTube
thank you.
channel, his podcast. I'm going to take myself off so Daniel can get started.
Well, thank you for that, Marcy. And I just want to thank Marcy for having this event, the Notary Public Day Extravaganza, being a free event. This is just great for me. And everybody knows Marcy. You know, Marcy always comes with a professional event, being very professional. I just want to thank Marcy for having this event. And my contribution to this event, I'm going to talk about sovereign citizens. And just let me make sure I can move forward. Just to talk about sovereign citizens, before I even get into my presentation, I just have to do a disclaimer because I am not an attorney. This is for educational purposes only and designed not to give you legal advice or guidance. It's just for your education. And I don't want anybody to misuse this information provided in this course. And just to give you a little bit, because I know some people might not be familiar with me out there. I have been, this is a little bit about me, myself, because I know a lot of times when you go on these type of events, you have someone just show up and then they're just spewing information. I want to give you a little bit of information about myself. I've been a notary, full-time notary entrepreneur since 2003. In 2010, I was named the National Notary of the Year by the National Notary Association. In that same year, I was named as an honorary Secretary of State in the state of Indiana by the Indiana Secretary of State office for my community service that I did in my state. I'm an approved educational vendor for the Department of Insurance for both Indiana and Virginia. I host, like Marcy said, the Notary podcast streaming exclusively on YouTube. So please go to YouTube. I interview people like Marcy. I interview escrow officers, title officers, uh, the people in title companies, signing agent people, tax people, business people, anything to help promote the Office of Notary Public. And we have a lot of fun on that YouTube channel. And also, I am, just on a personal note, a husband, father, grandfather, Navy veteran, cancer, and COVID survivor. When I say COVID survivor, I was in a hospital for 4.5 weeks, surviving COVID from because at that time we, as notaries, were considered people that had to go to work when all other businesses shut down, and I contracted COVID very bad, but all better now. Now, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to learn a little bit about sovereign citizens, because some of you may not know what sovereign citizens are. So we're going to talk about what they are, red flags in presenting documents, understanding legal implications and notary liabilities, and also how to keep yourself safe. Now, I've been a full-time notary entrepreneur since 2003. When I first started, I started as a 100% a notary signing agent, doing real estate documents. And then after 2008, my full-time notary business actually evolved into general notary work. So I've had a lot of uh, experience with real estate, a lot of experience with general notary work, and I have come across sovereign citizens as a notary entrepreneur. And as I was telling Marcy before, when I started, uh, researching this particular subject, my ideas and the way I thought about sovereign citizens was totally different 2 years ago than it is now. And the reason for that, because when I started researching this subject in particular, I research it with my Secretary of State's office, my attorney, and some sovereign citizens actually. And my views from 2 years ago has changed uh, till now. And some of you may have had some experiences with some sovereign citizens, and you can see in this presentation, your views might change a little bit on how to handle uh, documents from sovereign citizens. So let's get right into it. Second. Okay, the agenda is what is sovereign citizens. Like I said, common document types, red flags, notary legal bounds. I'm going to go into risk and liability, and we're going to talk about some best practices, and also we're going to talk about common scenarios that I have. First, let's talk about what is sovereign citizens. Sovereign citizens movement is a loosely organized anti-government movement whose adheres belief that they are not subject to government statutes or proceedings. There are several types of sovereign citizens that you might encounter. Some of them may call themselves Moorish citizens, Morocco citizens, citizens in a particular type of well, it's hard for me to say that, Indian tribe, but they all have kind of the similar beliefs. Core beliefs is individuals can declare themselves sovereign. What that means is they are exempt from laws. Legal theory, rejection of the government laws. They create documents, create that and identifications that might not be legal. Again, when it comes to notaries, they may create documentation and identification that are not legal documents. When it comes to notaries, some of the documentations that they may create is they may have a legal passport, for example, but if they write on the passport or change the passport to say not a legal citizen, doesn't contract with the U.S. government, if they make any modifications to a document from the BMV or DMV or the U.S. government or a passport that says they don't contract, you can't accept those type of documents because they've been modified. And there's a lot of sovereign citizens in the United States at this time, or people that adhere to that belief system. So, as a notary, one of the biggest things that you should be aware of if they have a legal document that they modify to say don't contract with the United States government, sovereign, or anything like that. As a notary, you can't take that document and use that document as a legal identity because it's a modified document. Hopefully, let me see if I have any questions in the chat with that. I don't see anybody.
No
Yeah.
questions yet.
No questions yet. Okay, good. Good. Let me take that off. Okay. Common things that you see document types is common law and trust or liens, affidavit of truth, um, private security agreements and redemption documents. And we're going to talk about some of the other documents that you'll see if you're doing real estate, like UCC financing documents, misuse to claim immunity or property rights documents. You also see something like birth certificate, bonds, or declaration of sovereignty. You'll see those type of documents if you ever run across documents like that. And common beliefs. And this is another thing, especially if we have notaries out there that do general notary work and they come across sovereign citizens. Sometimes, if we talked about, I think I talked about this with Marcy a little bit before. If you're doing general notary work with sovereign citizens, like I said on a slide, belief that the government holds secret accounts in each person's name. attempts to access these fictitious accounts through fraudulent documents. I have had encounters with sovereign citizens where they have legitimate photo IDs or legitimate uh, government identification that they want to use, but then they want to pay you with these fictitious accounts. For example, an example of that would be they would give you just a blank sheet of paper right on here. This comes out of my I don't even know how to pronounce this, government account that is in a trust. This comes out of my trust from a government account and say that's the tender that they want to pay you. Usually in those accounts, I usually say, well, since I'm a government official, I can only accept money or payment through accounts like that is governed by the United States government, like credit cards, uh, uh, bank accounts, or credit unions. Only can be paid that way. So if you ever encounter a sovereign citizen that wants you to do some type of general notary work, or even work for um, the exchange to do a transfer of real estate, you need to make sure of what the payment method is. And I always just say it has to be from an account governed by the United States government, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Red flags for sovereign citizens. Overuse of legalese or archaic terms, such as scrawl man, I'm a flesh and blood person. Our Secretary of State in our state says that they often get documents that sovereign citizens want to use blood print. They cut their finger and they want to use a blood print on the documents, those type things. Sometimes sovereign citizens have their own stamps, seals, or symbols resembling court and government emblems. Documents referring to them as a straw man or their name as a corporate fiction. These are all things that sovereign citizens do for during that transaction if they're with or they're trying to do a transaction with you as a notary. Also, other things like unclear signing capacity or fictitious entities. A lot of times, sovereign citizens that I've encountered, they never want to give, like, you have to use what your state considers the right identification. But usually they want to give a passport that does not have clear uh, address for them. They always say they're like I'm in Indiana. Sovereign citizens that I've encountered would say that they live in the state of Indiana, and that's their address, state of Indiana or region of Indiana. They never want to give their actual address, and also give statements of rejecting jurisdiction or claiming immunity. When they don't give their actual physical address, um, a lot of times the theory with sovereign citizens means that means they're not contracting with you. So if you're doing general notary work or if they're trying to buy a piece of property, they don't want to give their actual physical address. They'll just say uh, Indiana or Indiana Union or something like that, or in your state union. Sovereign citizens also believe in their belief that courts operate under only maritime or rather a common law, or they always refer to the Black Law Dictionary. And a lot of attorneys feel that that's just an outdated source of reference for sovereign citizens. They also feel like if they go to court, the court does have the gold fringe on the flags, which is interpreted as evidence of an amity jurisdiction, which is a jurisdiction that doesn't really pertain to them. And that's important for you to know as a notary that, the laws, according to the sovereign citizens, don't really pertain to them. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're dealing with that. Okay, notaries should be aware of these following common sovereign citizen terms when you're dealing with sovereign citizens, which would be a light bulb that should go off in your head. They are referred to party creditor, straw man, or straw man themselves as straw man, or not being a straw man. Often if you look on the internet and you put in sovereign citizens, they often refer to the UCC financing statement, accepting for value without prejudice by special appearance, juris, flesh and blood, man or woman. So you have to always be, if you're hearing these terms, these are kind of some of the terms that they use during a transaction with you. A couple of things and this is some of the things that I said at the beginning that has changed my perspective to how I deal with sovereign citizens as a notary entrepreneur. Because just 2 years ago, my view was if someone brought me a document, and this is my view from talking with my attorney. If somebody brought me a document, I didn't care what was in the document. Um, my view is I'm not an attorney. I can't advise anybody to what's in their document, whether it's be true or false in the document. But after talking with the Secretary of State here and attorney and sovereign citizens, my view is this: there's some things that notaries will be asked to notarize that we can have a very definitive no and a very definitive let me get more research on that. And I'll go over those documents here in a minute. But when you're dealing with sovereign citizens, and we just went over some of the red flags that you'll see in the documents, you definitely need to refer to your most up-to-date notary handbook in your state. Make sure you're following that. And as another resource, the NNA has some great information about uh, with the Model Notary Act on how to handle certain documents. And notaries must refuse a document if it contains something that knowingly you know is fraudulent in the document. So let me go over some of those examples and how to respond to those. First, you stay calm and professional. You avoid debate and confrontation with anything, with anybody, whether it's a sovereign citizen or someone else. You always stay calm and professional. Explain your legal limitations. I can only notarize lawful and complete documents. No documents, of course, with blank in the documents. You can only notarize, and this is according to our Secretary of State, legal and lawful documents according to your notary handbook. Do not notarize if documents appear fraudulent or incomplete. And this also goes with if you get identification like a passport. This usually happens when you get sovereign citizens with passports that sometimes are um, manipulated or modified to say don't contract with the state. If they're modified in any way, you can't take those that ID. Record the interaction in your journal, including facts only. You only want to talk about the facts, not how the person made you feel, not the person getting confrontational, but just the facts of that transaction. Report any threats or coercions to local law enforcement or your state notary division. You want to make sure you do that. And I think a lot of secretaries of state around the country do have files for sovereign citizens and how they interact with sovereign citizens. So make sure you do all these things. Um, because when you're dealing with sovereign citizens, especially if it's a document that has a threat against a state official or judge or sheriff, they really look at that and see if there's any type of if that notarization was proper. And there are some civil and criminal penalties that can be imposed against the notary. So this could result in the commission, suspension, or revoked civil lawsuits for negligence or aiding fraud and damage to professional reputation. So it's something that you should definitely be aware of as a notary out there doing transactions each day. Now, let's look at some common scenarios. Let me see if I have any chat before I do that.
We have
Oh,
some chats. Yeah.
very good. Matt Miller says California Secretary of State has sent warning letters to multiple California notaries who have notarized sovereign citizens' documents in recent years, stating that if they continue to notarize these documents, they will be subject to disciplinary action. And see, even with that, just talking about that, like I said, 2 years ago, I would say, I'm not an attorney. I can't tell them whether that's good document or not good document, legal document. And I just would, if they have the right identification, I would move forward with the notarization. But secretaries of state across the country, as Matt has mentioned, they're taking a stance against this, and they're really taking a stance with notaries because notaries are public officials. So you have to take some time, and what an attorney advised me of is that if you have a document in front of you and you're not an attorney and you're a notary, and it's questionable, and the document says something questionable, and I'll go into some of the scenarios real quick. Let me see if there's anything else in the chat.
One says, have you encountered sovereign citizens in a Ron setting?
I have not because I am not a Ron uh, notary, but I have had some notaries that I have in some meetups and some meetups talk about they have encountered sovereign citizens, and it's the same rules apply. You have to follow your state guidelines. Same rules apply with the um, documents that it has to meet a certain standard of your state, and you just have to make sure you understand what your state guidelines are. Bernice, in my business networking group, one of the members is a part of the group that sends me referrals from various people she associates with that needs notary services. I don't know how to say I can't provide services to her referrals. Fortunately, I'm not available when they need services. Do you have any suggestions on how to turn away those referrals? Yes. If you get something that you're uncomfortable with and it's from a sovereign citizens group, usually the documents are to sever what sovereign citizens mean, want to do is sever their ties to any type of uh, government agency or the state, um, and you don't feel comfortable with that. What the verbiage I've gotten, Bernice, was that I'm not sure I look at the document and say, I'm not sure as a government official I can notarize this. Let me get some more information about whether I can notarize this information and get back to you. And then my Secretary of State says, send that request to them, and they'll either get back to me or not get back to me. But that's the verbiage I give from the Secretary of State that I have.
Daniel, someone wants to know, are there states that they're more concentrated in, or are sovereign
But
citizens found all across the
they're
country?
found all across the United States. Um, have anyone ever had someone ask you to
Hmm.
is that become receive email mail on their behalf? Yeah, they can ask you to receive mail on your behalf, but I wouldn't recommend it as a business entrepreneur or notary entrepreneur. I wouldn't recommend taking they can always, because the reason for people asking um, you as the notary to receive mail on their behalf, because part of that theology is to not have an address. And without an address, they feel that they don't have to contract with the state or government. So if you're receiving mail on that behalf, that you can be looped into uh, being a member of fraudulent activity, from my understanding. John Valerdi. Yeah, some people believe that sometimes sovereign citizens is an oxymoron. If you watch any of the videos on YouTube about sovereign citizens, some people say they are sovereign citizens. Some people say they're not sovereign citizens. Some people say it is an oxymoron. You're either sovereign or you're a citizen. But either position is that they don't contract with local or federal government. That makes it. Hopefully, I answered your question, John. John from Indiana. Let's look at some of the. I'll come back to your questions. Let's look at some of the common scenarios that notaries may encounter with sovereign citizens. Let me see if I can go to the next slide. Here we go. And this is some of the common scenarios as notaries you'll have. A person asks you to notarize a lien against a judge, law enforcement or officer, or government official, claiming it's a common law lien for treason or violations of rights. This is something that is common with the sovereign citizens. They may ask you to do that with that. And now, before I show you some of the answers, anybody have any idea of how to handle that if they receive that? I'm looking in the comments. Ah, is that Mr. or Mrs. Daniels? That's what happened to me. He went to court to respond back to my address. I refused for days. He kept texting me and saying it's my duty to notarize. Yeah. Anybody else had that happen? I don't see anybody else. So here's some suggestions on how you can handle that. Decline the notarization, such as such filings are often fraudulent and illegal. Explain you are not permitted to notarize documents intended to harass or intimidate. Note the attempted transaction in your journal for your protection. Anybody has a different suggestion? I don't see any different suggestion. But yeah, that's my first common scenario that can happen. Yeah. Let's go to see if is there another one. Someone brings a common law trust deed claiming to transfer property to the living man or woman of the, I'm just using my name, the Lewis Estate Trust under natural law jurisdiction. Yeah, and this can happen. Anybody encountered this particular scenario? Matt Miller says fraud. Okay, once we raise our notary fees to the state guidelines, that lowers the number of sovereign citizens that came to City Hall. Also, Christine Whispering, I believe she's in Michigan. Anybody else had this particular situation happen? And this can happen if somebody's already in the property and they're trying to transfer the property. And then I've seen one uh, case study where this lady had an apartment and she was trying the same thing with the common law trust and claiming that she was a citizen of an Indian tribe, um, and that uh, didn't go well for her in court. Oh, we have some more comments. I'm sorry. What laws do they respect and do they think, and this is from Darlene Wallace, what laws do they respect and do they think they can break the law and get away with it because they claim to be sovereign? Do you think it is an attitude or lawlessness, and is the movement growth? Do you know? That is an interesting question, Darlene. The thing is I think from my perspective, uh, people believe what I mean, people legitimately believe. Uh, in this theory, this they generally believe that they can um, send paperwork to the state, usually the Secretary of State's office, and sever their contracts with the state and federal government, which means that they can drive without a license. They can go in places and, like this one situation says, they can declare themselves living, breathing man or woman that doesn't have to follow the state and federal laws. They legitimately uh, believe that, and they can pretty much be lawless. There's a lot of videos out online about them being pulled over for different reasons and saying they don't have to follow the laws because they're not I'm sorry that the term doesn't come to me that they are like from a different country and they don't have to follow the laws in this country, if that makes sense. John says, if we do not notarize liens against public officials, does that include tort claims, AO 91, federal criminal complaints? It, from discussions with representatives from the Secretary of State's office, you're not supposed to notarize things that are uh, going to harass or intimidate state officials like Secretary of State, state attorney generals, the governor. I've seen people try to have me notarize things against those officials, against the sheriff's office. Um, I always refer them back to the Secretary of State's office. If there's any question, I refer them back to the Secretary of State's office. Yes, Lori, you are totally correct. There are body cams all over the place. If you go, all you have to do is put in sovereign citizens that they don't have to abide by the state laws and the federal laws. Matt Miller, citizens, wait, going too fast. Let me see if I can get back to Matt's. Uh, Sorry, I missed Matt's. Let me see. Okay, let me get Matt's. Who belongs to a particular country, state, or commonwealth by birthright, naturalization, and has legally recognized rights and duties as a member of that entity. Well, once again, I always refer back to the your Secretary of State. I work for Social Security, and a man provided documentation that he wanted to relinquish his Social Security number. Yep, that's true. Because then they don't feel like they have to contract. Please also note I have been, and this is from, let's see, let me go down. Sorry, Beth McGee. She worked in a role experiencing psychosis and other challenges who espouse the sovereign citizen movement because they are vulnerable to suggestion by people who exploit them. It is important to maintain professionalism and compassion in our communication, excuse me, not denying or encouraging in their politics, but uh, being confident about what we as notaries can and cannot do. Very great, a great comment there. Yes, as notaries, we are not there to give our own opinions about them, our own bias about them. That's their belief system. And some people, they really believe this. Of course, you have some people using the sovereign citizens claim to try to get out of tickets or claim property, but a lot of people they truly believe in that. So definitely take them seriously that and don't try to belittle their beliefs just to keep yourself safe. Back to this common scenario, someone with the common trust. This is how. There's some suggestions of how you can definitely handle this as notary. Confirm the property transfer must comply with state recording and ID laws. If a grantor or grantee is fictitious or non-existent, the deed is invalid. So you have to make sure you maintain, because a lot of sovereign citizens, especially in the Moorish sect, change their names. So the names have to be legitimate and you have to use the proper state identification for that. When you're declining the notarization, explain, I can only notarize documents involving real identifiable parties with valid ID. So I'm going to go to a third scenario I have. An individual presents a bond, a promissory bond note and birth certificate security or UCC 1-308 filing to claim their strawman identity. Anybody ever encountered this? 2010, Matt Miller said in 2010, two notaries in upstate New York were implicated in a federal racketeering lawsuit by notarizing liens and documents that falsely alleged local governments and employees owned billions of dollars to the sovereign citizen. Owed billions of dollars to the sovereign citizen. The notaries successfully argued their role was limited to verifying signatures, not the contents of the documents, and were eventually exonerated. It took 7 months for the notaries to clear their names, uh, ultimately convincing the plaintiff's attorney of their innocence. Yes, but that's 7 months, and I'm sure they had legal fees and everything else. That's such a great. Thank you so much for that, Matt. And you don't want to be involved in those practices. I've seen notaries all across the country go to do court cases and court cases with sovereign citizens. Not yet, but when they do go to court and they have to uh, fight for their what they're there for. Like that, those notaries in this case, 2 months ago, it might have been me doing the same thing. Because I wouldn't look at the document and say, I can't give you legal advice. I can only take your ID, and that's required by the state, and compare it to my state guidelines. And that might have been me. But now I'm taking a different approach to the sovereign citizens transactions, and everything has to be according to the state guidelines. And if there's any question whatsoever, I'm referring the sovereign citizen back to my Secretary of State's office. Let's see how on this one how people could handle this. Some suggestions. Do not notarize these documents. They are pseudo financial fraud documents, like the one that Matt was talking about. State clearly documents does not appear to be to serve a legal, lawful purpose for notarization. Suggest they contact a licensed attorney, and this is always good. Have the sovereign citizens contact a licensed attorney, and if they have any legal questions. Any questions about this one?
There is a question in here, Daniel. It says, what stands out on these documents? Do you have a sample of one?
I don't have a sample of one, but the documents would have in there suggestions that I've seen that that they're suing my Secretary of State, they're suing the State Attorney General, they're that like what Matt Miller's had in the comments, that the governor owes them billions of dollars, and they needed that notarized, that they recognize that government owes them billions of dollars, or they're suing a local judge, or the judge, they're going to put a lien against the judge uh, for like, I think some of them have fee schedules that says if they go to court, they have to the court owes them 5,000, 15,000, 20,000 a minute for their time, and they're wanting to have the notary notarize that document, and they want to record it at the county. Those are kind of suggestions about uh, some documents that you might encounter. Lori McPherson says, when you say that you refer them to the Secretary of State, are they calling them, or are they sending documents and waiting for the Secretary of State to answer? Yes, they're doing both. They're calling, believe me, and my Secretary of State says they get calls from sovereign citizens all the time. In that last question, are they in certain parts of the area? They are all over the United States. You can see sovereign citizens videos on YouTube from Oregon down to Florida. How much refusal detail do you recommend we document in our journal, darling? I would recommend that when you say refusal journal, I just put in there refused due to uh, questionable legal documents. That's what I put in my journal. If it's something that they're suing their Secretary of State or the judge or the sheriff, I put it in because of I don't I don't put so much detail because I do have my journal signed and I do have it covered, but I don't want to put too much detail in there so that somebody else can see it, if that makes sense. What other questions do we have when you say uh, somebody recommended a Netflix movie called Sovereign, and it shares some interesting information. Any other questions that we have?
I just want to quickly comment that if you decide to go out there and start to Google sovereign citizens and the Moors, know that you want to be very careful when you end up on one of their websites. They do use tracking, they do have viruses on there. So be cautious when out there on Google when it comes to finding more information.
Very good comment. Very good comment. And I did have at a recent meetup, someone came in and this person was a sovereign citizen, and their understanding was that they didn't have to go through. They wanted to become a notary, but they didn't have to go through their the regular channels, the Secretary of State governing bodies, and they were under the impression that they can just create their own stamp, they can create their own documents, and they can create their own currency. So I just wanted to be, especially if you're doing general notary work, because I've had encountered this myself, that you must, and if you know you're encountering a sovereign citizen, you must ask for, uh, and their documents are legitimate, because sometimes they can have legitimate documents and they can have legitimate forms of ID that they are paying you in U.S. currency that is recognized by your state government, if that makes sense. Any other questions that you may have? Oh, how much refusal? Oh, did that. Any other questions anybody has, whether on sovereign citizens or anything?
We have a few more minutes. So
Yes.
now is your chance to talk to Daniel. I just like to tell the Daniel that there was a conversation here just recently where a sovereign citizen attempted to buy a property using what he said was valid currency, these coins that his group or society had generated. And that's how he was going to buy this property in New York City. And the attorney
Yes.
had never dealt with a sovereign citizen before. So it was an interesting conversation to have, but you will see that sometimes they'll try to pay you in their own currency, not in US currency.
Yes, they try to pay you in different, and sometimes it's just like because some groups believe that the government has a special trust for everyone. So they'll write on a sheet of paper or type up in a sheet of paper, paid out of my trust with no banking information on that. So you just got to be very careful with that. Sharma Kinney, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I've heard hard time understanding how they do not believe in the government, but wants a representative of the government to sign their documents. Do they believe notaries are not part of the government representative? No, in fact, which is interesting, in a lot of sects of the sovereign citizens, they have documents that they get online. They print them out, and they need a government official to notarize it, a notary to notarize it, so that they can send it into the government that says they're severing their contracts with the government. So they need a government official to do that. That's why they need notaries to notarize their documents. And also, in when it comes down to real estate, like Marcy said they need a government official to say, I'm buying this property with my trust or with coins that they create themselves. Hopefully that answered your question, Sharman. And hopefully I'm saying that right.
I think there's two questions that kind of go hand in hand about, is there anything for us to notarize, and have you actually ever notarized documents for sovereign citizens? And I think Daniel touched on that. They do have valid documents sometimes, and they do
Yes.
have valid ID. It's not always going to be something fraudulent.
Yeah, when especially if they come to you with valid ID with a document that and I have notarized documents for sovereign citizens because they had a valid ID. The documents were looked like they wasn't meant to harass the state official, but the document was that they want to sever their contracts or sever their understanding with the state of whatever state you're in. But they have to have valid state ID, and they do with those documents is send them into the Secretary of State and say they no longer want a contract with the state. But my understanding, I think secretaries of state across the country are taking a different approach with that. They don't want notaries to validate documents. The verbiage they gave to harass or intimidate state officials. If that makes sense.
You may remember Wesley Snipes was convicted of tax evasion, and
Yes.
he claimed sovereign citizenship as why he didn't pay his taxes. So you never really know.
John asked if I've ever encountered a 1099, to present as tender or as a discharge instrument. No, I haven't, not myself. I have had sovereign citizens tell me that that the government has a trust account that's in the millions for everybody, and they want to present me with they want to type up a document that says I can get paid from that trust. And I said, no, it can't. It has to be something regulated by the state and federal. Beth McGee, but with that document that we know will go nowhere, why would it be ethical for us to notarize and take their money for that? Well, Beth, the two trains of thought with that. Notaries aren't attorneys. And if you feel uncomfortable with a document, like I said, you can refer them to a licensed attorney on that. And yeah, you can refer them to a licensed attorney. And here's another example of that, Beth. In Indiana, they changed the law with using a certain type of powers of attorneys in hospitals. They want them to be advanced directives. I know they want them to be advanced directives, but I can't legally say that's the wrong form to notarize. I always refer them back to either the social worker that sends them to me, but sometimes people are just very say, I know I want to use this power of attorney, not just for the hospital, but for something else. I can't advise them on which documents to use for what use, if that makes sense. You can always refer them back to a licensed attorney. Bernice, the one person I've encountered states on her bills, gas, and electric, to be paid by the government trust account. Yeah, yeah, when you hear government trust account, and they give you that form saying this is how I'm paying you, and there's no banking information, you know that's not good. Matt wants to know if she still have power and gas. She does. All right. One question that came up. What's my contact information? Sorry, I didn't anticipate that question, but here it is.
Any other questions before we wrap up with Daniel? This was great. This was a great conversation. It was good information. I think it's one of those things notaries should be aware of. So, Daniel, I certainly appreciate you sharing all of this with us. And I appreciate everyone who took time out of their Saturday to come and learn something, hopefully new, get some new information, protect yourself and the public out there. Thank you, everyone, for attending yet another amazing Notary Public Day extravaganza session. We have one more to go. I hope to see you there. But if not, I hope you all have a great rest of your Saturday and a wonderful weekend.
Big
Daniel,
sh
thank you again.
big shout out to Mike Phillips for joining.
Yes, thank you, Mike Phillips, for joining out of your busy schedule. We appreciate
Yes.
you too. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.